Welcome to the podcast. Excited to introduce our guest for you guys today. We got John DeMartino. I want to jump into a lot of what's going on, AI, not AI, what's real, what's not real, and just a whole landscape of what's happening out there from a tech perspective. And, John's got a great background. I'm interested to ask him a couple of questions as well. First, John, what do you do? What are you doing today? What are you doing yesterday? Where are you working? What's going on in your world? And introduce yourself a little bit so that we know who we're talking to.
Yeah, absolutely. So John DeMartino, I am a staff solutions engineer at Google Cloud, part of the Google Cloud consulting arm. Primarily, I work on an incubation team, so I'm very fortunate to partner with product on new features, solutions that are just coming to the market and running pilots with customers to kind of validate the user journey, the customer experience, and then funneling feedback back to the PMs and engineering to validate friction points. And I really feel very fortunate that I'm on this tip of the spear as the landscape is
you
evolving.
Must be seeing everything at the forefront because of how innovation that's going on as a whole out there. And then they're all funneling to essentially two sources, which is going to be through Google or through AWS, which we'll chat through that again in the future. But yeah, no, that's awesome. Where did you start? How did you get in to the AI space? Like, what drew you over here, and how did you even get the first experience? Because you've been in here for a while.
Yeah, I was at JP Morgan for about a year, and I felt like I really wanted to kind of move over to an environment that was doing more like cloud computing, and I was very data focused. So I went to a company called Looker, and they had a data analytics platform, and I was very fortunate that we got acquired my 5th month there into Google right when COVID hit was when that integration happened. And that kind of set us back a little bit in terms of making that as smooth as possible. But around 2022, I was very fortunate enough to kind of land on a new team that allowed me to get more almost like a response to what was happening with the OpenAI. So we kind of got put on this team that was starting to incubate the LLM products that were rolling out from Google Cloud. And I've been super fortunate. I couldn't have predicted this path. I didn't know 5-6 years ago I was going to land here, but I feel like I've just been kind of riding this roller coaster.
And I know you spoke at Google's big conference. What was that, Google Console?
Google Next. I spoke there this past April on agentic security and a solutions talk. It was my first time at Next. 30,000 people. It's kind of crazy. You feel so small when you're around so many people, so many vendors. But it was great to just talk to customers and just feel the excitement in the air.
It's buzzing, and it's interesting because you stumbling into this space and then being at the forefront of it is really interesting. During 2020, moving throughout that whole COVID post-COVID period, OpenAI coming out, from us, for a lot of the people that listen to us and we interact with, OpenAI is really what they know of, or ChatGPT. They're really just going to say ChatGPT, not even OpenAI. It's a very basic, understanding of what's going on out there. What's your thought on what OpenAI did? Pros and cons, because I have my own opinion on some of it, but the I guess viral, how viral OpenAI went and ChatGPT went. Do you think that was helping or hurting some of the perception that's going on there about AI?
Yeah. So first of all, I would say the ChatGPT really predominant in the consumer space, but in the enterprises where I kind of focus on, I would say it's much more. There's way more optionality in what I'm seeing from what customers are choosing. I think the big moment that made ChatGPT so viral was really from having a clean product. Because if you think about it, the LLM architecture has been around pre-COVID, right? 2018. That I don't know why it never became a product sooner. I mean, that's you just have to kind of have the right vision. But that chat interface, I think, just really resonated with a lot of people. And I think one of the great designs is when you're actually experiencing that back and forth chat with an LLM, it feels like a real conversation, but under the hood, it's actually taking each interaction and sending the entire conversation history to the LLM to kind of generate the next token, and to make that feel like a natural conversation has just kind of, I think, helped explode. And now you're seeing there's more it's now moving beyond just text, right? Like I was working with a customer yesterday about how do we kind of now leverage video and images into like kind of these outputs and automations workflows.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like it helped mainstream AI, and it helped people overcome the fear a little bit of AI because they were able to interact with it, see it, feel it, touch it, interact with it in such a clean manner. But part of me also feels like, and I definitely inside the finance space for like accounting and finance, it also set somewhat of a false expectation of what AI really is. Because now what ends up happening is you get a lot of these, everybody feels a need to push AI. So you have all these companies that are screaming, we have AI, and it's nothing more than like ChatGPT wrapper or an LLM wrapper that they're slapping stuff on front of. So we're seeing on our side, and I'm sure you have more opinion on it, the difference between perspective and reality with AI, and what would you consider AI, and what do you consider, I'm going to call impostor AI, which is going to be a new thing that we're going to trademark after this.
That's funny. Well, first of all, like so many, I go to conferences, summits, and you just hear so many like members of boards, execs talking about how we have to have these like AI strategies. How is this kind of transform our business? And then when you kind of dig a little deeper, you talk to, at least when I talk to kind of some of my like less technical stakeholders, the worst response they could say to me is like, why can't AI just solve this without any like SME oversight? And it's like, well, it's not AGI. It's not going to like kind of solve all your problems without any oversight. So that's kind of like the fake promises. I think though, like, at least right now, or at least for me personally, and what I've been experiencing, it's really like, how do we tap into this new set of tools to kind of like really optimize our workflows, reduce friction points, save on cost, save on time, etc. And while also with maintaining or balancing, like mitigating the risks, right? Like we're really, really leaving deterministic workflows, and now we're having these like non-deterministic workflows. And you have so many of these great demos that are really shiny and flashy, but the second you think about security or like outside the very tightly scripted demo, it kind of goes off the rails. So like adding those guardrails, that's really kind of how you really allow this to have greater adoption, especially in the enterprise. I feel like that's really kind of where my like focus has been, and that actually I think applies even more to the financial institutions, right? Because they have so many checks and regulations they have to worry about. I remember I worked with this bank in like 2023, and like one of the big things it's a European bank, and one of the big things they kept harassing us about was explainability. We need to know like why the outputs are happening, and it's it's all trade-offs, right? So if you want to work with some of these like leading edge models, then you're gonna, we call them like closed weights, so you don't have exposure to the weights, that you're not going to have insights, right? You can maybe have the model give you a reason, but I don't know if every regulator wants that. Or you can trade off and have like an open source model, and there's a couple of like patterns out there that you can see which input tokens are influencing the output tokens the most. But again, that's a trade-off of like, might not be as like smart or high reasoning of the model.
It's interesting that you're going that way, and I'm gonna pull it back a second. So first, briefly, can you walk us through the difference between deterministic workflow and non-deterministic workflow, just so that the audience understands?
Yeah, so deterministic workflow is if you have code that's running maybe like 2 + 2 will always equal 4, right? You know that is always going to be the route that it takes. Where a non-deterministic, so these LLMs are probabilistic models that when you're providing your input, your tokens, your prompt, your system instructions, it's providing you outputs, but it's non-deterministic. You might not get the same response even if you have the same input tokens every single time. There's less predictability. Which causes risk. Issues like a lot.
So
of risk.
in the accounting finance space, right, and specifically accounting, where most of the time we need the same output, right? So our approach from one of our subsidiaries underneath Node is heavily algorithmic driven, so that we could make sure that we're getting the right output from the algorithm, but allowing the AI to make the determination of which algorithm do I grab to apply. So Is that AI or is that not AI?
I would say like the routing of the algorithm is probably like an AI workflow, but the whole workflow is not AI. Just an element of the workflow is, right. And that's actually, again, like that's how you need to be thinking about this stuff. Is like, how am I, whatever unit I'm trying to, or whatever value I'm trying to deliver, like AI is now going to be like an additional player in that workflow.
I'm going to jump down this path because I almost got punched by a lady with pink hair at some trade show, literally over this argument. So we're going to go back and do this now. So AI, in your opinion, is not the sole answer to everything. You're saying what I'm hearing, and maybe it's because I want to hear it because it's defending what I was saying, but there's a certain extent of what AI can do and can't do in a comfortable setting. Now, are you pro combining AI with some more deterministic behavior to then get more controlled outputs and not letting it run wild? Or are you actually pro, and this was not the argument that I had, but it's the other side of the AI space of allowing the AI to run until that undeterministic behavior becomes more predictable?
I think it all depends on what you're trying to accomplish. So, first of all, I think it's safe to say that the level of sophistication of the models is at the worst it is right now, and it's only going to get better. But where we are right now, I think it again depends like where you're where you're like what you're working on. So for me personally, right, I use Claude Code for some personal projects. I will set up a prompt with Claude Code and just let it run until for 2 hours, 3 hours. I actually just installed the plugin the other day that when it's done, it actually will send me a text message that it's completed. So yeah, that is now doing its own thing, and with the very little oversight. But in the enterprise world where we have more like risks and considerations that we need to kind of take account for, then yes, I'm always thinking about like what guardrails we need to have in place to ensure that we are not letting something run wild or rampant without the necessary oversight. So that, and that it's really like so wide of like what that umbrella is. So from like sanitizing input to output tokens, making sure you have like the right like data loss, like you want to redact, you don't want sensitive information to kind of come in or come out. You want to do sanitization on prompts to make sure you're not doing any prompt injection. You want to try to, for like certain situations, you want to ground them in like your knowledge documents or whatever like the ground truth is to kind of make sure it's not hallucinating. There's so many different strategies around there, and these are how you get closer from like an enterprise perspective to seeing wider adoption and more trustfulness amongst your employees. Because for a lot, especially like again around 2003, you only get a first impression once when you roll out a new app, and the second you give somebody a bad answer or it's super super slow, it's really hard to kind of turn that opinion around. Even if it was maybe just like a one shot and like next week you've kind of fixed that and it never happens again, it's super super hard to deal with that. So that's why, to like change that person's mind, so that's why it's so important you think about these guardrails early from a product perspective.
I feel like that was really impactful, really, really helpful to kind of look at it and position it into the accounting and finance space also, because one thing that we're getting a lot of feedback on is, again, false expectations. People want more or think there should be more than what there is. What we're spending a lot of time on is trying to protect the industry, because there's this rush to say that we have AI, and there's this rush out there to try and implement it and be this early adopter of AI, and they're catching on this wave. There's also a rush of bad actors and products that aren't truly ready to be implementing what they're saying that they're implementing. And my fear is that you could crush a whole industry, because small industries like accounting, they're very ancestral. That word will spread, and at some point you're going to get into a situation why there's a reason why accounting is 20 years delayed. We have people coming on to us that still are not on cloud environments, right? They're literally paper files in their office and local servers, and they're not even on the cloud environment, because when the cloud was buzzing and pushing, everybody started running to the cloud, and the cloud environments weren't that built. They weren't robust. They weren't able to facilitate it. And that's it. They got one shot and the whole industry wrote it off. So my biggest fear for all industries is letting the people that are setting false expectations, crushing the hope of the whole industry.
Before I was at JP Morgan, when I first graduated from New Paltz in 2010, I was a paralegal at a law firm. And because I thought I was going to be a lawyer. And within like 6 months, I was like, oh, don't want to be a lawyer. What do I do next? And we were representing the insurers of the mortgage-backed securities. So it was a lot of big data. And first they were giving me these massive Excels. I didn't really know how to use Excel. So I started kind of like leveling up. But long story short, I ended up having to teach myself Python. And by the end of my tenure there, I was like, oh, this is an industry that will not change very fast, like the legal industry. So that's why I knew I need to kind of like make a move and get out. And 10 years now to 2025, I still feel like you have these industries that are just dragging their feet and still like adopting these old paradigms. And I'm curious how they actually, what's the camel that breaks the back? Is it a certain piece of software that has a monopoly on the industry that either introduces a killer feature, a killer LLM wrapper, like you kind of mentioned, or is it a new player? I'm super curious about this. I have a customer that's a pilot that's starting pretty soon that's actually taking me back to my legal routes in e-discovery. I'm very excited to see like how much has changed in the last like 10 years.
Yeah, we're in it. Legal, accounting, wealth management, insurance, all these industries are laggers, like straight, and they're lagging by decades, not just by years. And part of it, from my perspective, is when you're medical also, right? When you're a licensed professional that goes through all the standards and all the requirements to get that license certification, you feel like you're the only one qualified and you're the only person that can implement this. So nobody else knows, right? Where now we're starting to see the use of AI and like the fact that these, you could plug these LLMs in to pass any bar exam, any CPA exam, and maybe we aren't the superhumans in our industry that we thought we were. And maybe there's something else there. But I think the mindset of nobody could do what I do and I'm the best at it because I have the license, maybe subconsciously creates this lagging behavior where, but at the flip side, when you get innovation that steps in, typically these laggers do not embrace innovation until it's way too late. Like right now, we're seeing massive adoption of our innovation inside accounting, like massive adoption. However, we are very cautious on what we're promising and what we're telling them is the reality. And we're letting them know that this is a 2 to 3 year path. So in Arrive, which is one of our subsidiaries underneath Node, we're flat out telling them that our North Star is 95% autonomy inside each one of their firms in the next 3 years. That's our North Star. I'm more than confident that we're going to be able to hit that in the next 3 years. I off camera, so it's never going live, I'll tell you the real time frame of what I think it is. However, we're also letting them know that we're here in that journey, and we might be at 30% autonomy, and then within 3 months go to 95. It's not a slow, gradual pace. At some point, you're taking these like leaps and like plateauing and then leaping again.
I think about even from like 2023 where the industry was and what LLMs could do then, and just now 2 years later, it's kind of astonishing how much it's like grown and these leaps and bounds we've done. And it does feel we're still early in the journey, but that at any time like a new innovation can happen, and then that's boom, that we've covered an extra like 30% out of nowhere.
Yeah, I think it's for the lagging industries. It's a partnership, teamwork, community effort to be able to get the level of autonomy that they're looking for through AI. And the only way to get there is with data. And the only way to accumulate that data is by getting in and letting technology evolve to the point where we could get there, but resetting expectations up front, not lying to them, which is happening in a lot of these industries because people they're also VC backed. So the more VC backed software companies, the more they have to meet users, the more false expectations they're going to present, and they're going to scale user growth, and then you're going to have massive churn. Yeah, and then all of a sudden, the whole customer base is going to churn off because they fail to deliver on the expectations.
When you talk to these companies that are resistant, like what is it usually that allows them to change their mind? Is it just like an internal stakeholder that's a champion? Is it business results? Is it pressure from the outside? I'm curious, like how you see like change happening from these.
It's out of need. So right now in the accounting space, change is happening out of necessity because human capital is not available inside the accounting industry specifically. So we are losing a third of the accounting labor in over a 10-year period, and we're year 5 into that. So a third of all human capital is going away. And on the other side, the demand is picking up because retirement, phasing out, shutting down, there's less availability of accounting firms that service their customers. And the number of small businesses are growing and everything else is growing. So you have a 10% year-over-year increase in the amount of customers that need accountants and a 33% reduction in the number of accountants and staff to support it. So it's pure necessity. They literally can't keep up. The industry will not survive unless massive automation is put in place.
So that the people that are still there are just like X number percent more productive.
Completely.
Right?
That's it. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. 10x the productivity of the workforce, and all of a sudden supply and demand level out, quality of life level out, and everyone's happy.
Yeah. Sometimes I feel like especially on like the personal project I do, I just manage these LLMs, right? They do most of the heavy lifting.
Yeah. I have a question on the LLMs, just to touch on that. So are we going to have a clear winner in an LLM, or do you think these LLMs are going to migrate? And when we say LLM, we're talking, the Anthropic or Claude, back for everyone's interacting with Claude. So we'll say Claude, ChatGPT, Gemini. But what do you think is going to happen as far as the LLMs? Because OpenAI right now, where ChatGPT seems to be very consumer facing. Where do you kind of see it panning out?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think from a brand perspective, like ChatGPT is the most dominant. If you look at their usage numbers, it's like 800 million monthly users. I do think as Google gets more penetration with Gemini and it becomes more like CES just announced they have TVs now with Gemini on it, right? So there's just going to be more like touch points for everybody to interface with these LLMs. I think that's going to drive a lot of usage. In terms of a winner, I'm not really sure. Some days I think like, oh, these LLMs are becoming a commodity, but then I'll use like the Opus 4.5, the new Claude model for coding, and I'm just like kind of blown away with like how good it is. And it's like, oh wait, this is actually a differentiated product. And then also you have like these open source models, these ones that are coming out of China, right? The DeepSeek, the Quan, they're also pretty impressive. Not sure who the winner is going to be. I know from like my experience, at least from the enterprise, and I would say there's 2 that are probably kind of like the most used. I would say a combination of like Gemini and something in the Claude family. But then it becomes also like, okay, so you have the LLM, but like there's a whole ecosystem behind just like the LLM, right? So like where are they running, the different like additional like software product features that enable your workflows to kind of happen. I think there's also that whole area is like super ripe. And even if one company maybe is the LLM winner, there could be N number of companies that are one of the winners in this ecosystem.
I can see. I think we need more. The concept of China winning the AI race is absolutely terrifying. There's a lot of scary stuff that I'm looking at and experiencing. As we're getting into more of these industries and seeing more automation, you are actually seeing a future where massive unemployment could be a thing. And I know there's this big debate right now because nobody wants to be scared of AI. And I think we need to embrace it. And I think that in certain industries like accounting specifically, it's a necessity of survival. And because the industry is losing human capital anyway, it doesn't make a difference, right? At some point, a reduced number of human capital resources are going to be available just based off of age, retirement, changing industries and everything else, where you're not truly impacting unemployment. People aren't coming in and getting laid off. They're going to naturally just supply and demand will eventually catch up to each other. With that being said, I also could see a path with hundreds of thousands or millions of jobs that are going to be removed from here, and what that looks like in a world like that looks like.
The thing I think about right now, the folks that are probably being impacted the most are probably like new college grads,
Yes.
right? I think they're probably the ones that are having the hardest time getting their foot into the door, especially when like some of the go-to-market material, like you hear that the LLMs are so great at the intern, right? They can kind of like totally replicate all of that work. Yeah, I don't know how that's all going to shape up. I know, right now, I personally don't feel in jeopardy of being replaced. Like I think I'm, that's why I feel like you have to really embrace it to like optimize your productivity so that you actually are using this as another tool to kind of like stand out versus being complacent. On the flip side, I will say overusing these so much, I definitely like certain aspects of my workflows, I don't feel as sharp.
Yeah.
So like coding, for example, like I don't think I'm as good of a coder as I was 2 years ago, even though the product I'm producing, I feel like is 5x more like efficient. Probably like I'm more of like a backend, so I don't really do UIs much, but the latest Gemini release is so good at UIs, and like I'm able to kind of like prototype super fast. Like it's all kind of trade-offs. I try to make sure I still read and like kind of have certain skills to stay sharp.
I'll touch on one thing that you mentioned about the college graduates potentially being impacted. I'm actually seeing potentially the opposite. If the rest of the population does what they're supposed to be doing with embracing AI, I struggle, right? I'm 44. I struggle keeping up, right? I'm past that point where it's very difficult for me to interact with this. I understand really well what it does, what it can do. I could apply use cases to it, but to actually get in and get these things functioning, I'm relying on a whole bunch of mid 20-year-olds. And to me, the best staff and team that I've ever had are 22 to 28 to 30 years old, like right in that like sweet spot of the 20. They fly, they understand, they embrace, they adopt, and they really could jump in and get their hands dirty.
It's like when for us, like the computer kind of became part of like at the home, and when you went to work, like you had a whole generation that was super uncomfortable with it, but we totally embraced it, and like web applications, etc. I would also say similar to like social media, right? Like there was a huge swath of like younger people that kind of knew how to like work with it, and those were like the best marketers, etc. So I totally agree that there is like the youth, I guess, will the ones that are actually going through school right now and like embracing it in their like daily habits and being more productive are going to come out with these fresh perspectives, and hopefully they like help with the embracing of this and kind of moving this to a higher adoption.
But if you look at it similar to how you looked at when you went into the law space and you had to learn Python out of necessity so that you could then help move that data and do your tedious work more efficient and more effective, I almost feel like that's similar to what's happening now, where they can move these models around and they can prompt. It's really but mostly like prompting, and then being very, very like they're just so good at getting things to work. Like you said, like just getting Claude to text you. To me, we have it. We have AI bots inside our Slack channel, but it's all set up by our team. That's that younger generation. I love using it and interacting with it. The thought of how can I build that out?
Configuring it.
I'm a dinosaur.
Yeah, no, that's definitely valid. You hope though that like certain pieces of it which are like super frictionful, like now, like kind of setting this up, even like setting up like an open source model to kind of work on your computer. if you look on Twitter, people make it seem like so easy. It's not that easy. Like, so hopefully like in the coming, year or so, all these things are like more just less frictionful user journeys to kind of get to the point where you can now kind of tap into this.
I think user experience and user interface in the existing, AI platforms that are out there, and then continuing going forward, that's probably where it's at. Because the LLMs and all the models that are being built off of it are naturally just going to get better, better, and better. But the ease of interacting with them is probably going to be the next wave for the adoption, like you said with OpenAI.
And that's all product, and that's all product, right? Like having like it's more than just like an LLM as a wrapper that you're, when you use Excel, how many little icons are on the ribbon?
Yeah.
Right? It's insane.
Yeah.
But if you can have a really strong product that is doing the wrapper, that is like already has like your prompt engineering, another big term right now is like context engineering for these agentic workflows, that has that all, it's abstracted away, and your just user experience is, helps you be more productive or whatever you're trying to do. That's how you really drive like adoption, either from a consumer or enterprise perspective.
Yeah, no, completely there. So I want to touch on agents and the agentic side of everything, because everything starts to become a buzz. It's like from the very beginning, like everyone's all into, the agentic component right now. We inside our ecosystem need it. Like it's an absolute pure necessity. How can you walk us through, how do agents work? What is an agent? Because half the people that we talk to, are saying agents, but I don't know if they truly understand what an agent is.
Yeah. So in my mind, an agent is a series of components. So one of those would be your LLM. You also have your system instructions, your prompt, but you also have like the LLM is trained on a finite a lot of data, but it's within like a certain like time span, right? But if you really want the LLM to kind of know what today's weather is, you have to use tools to kind of allow it to kind of get more data, to interact with external data sources, external systems. And then you also want to introduce the concept of reasoning and planning. So all of those modulars, like that's in my mind is what like an agent is. You have an entry point, the UI, CL, a command line, whatever, an entry point that you're interfacing with an LLM that can reason and plan and work with tools to kind of achieve a workflow. And the LLM is just a component of this. There's a whole like agentic harness around it that does all the operating, right? So somewhere you have to have the runtime of where your backend service is running. You have to have an interface between the APIs for the tools. Like all of this stuff has to kind of be thought through. Even though you have a single LLM, you're going to have back and forth between different like sub agents. It could be the same LLM, but different like specialized prompts. So then you have to handle the context between each of those. Like there's a lot of like nuances that go into an agentic workflow. So it's way more than just the LLM.
Do you see agents doing one thing and one thing really well and then interacting with other agents, or agents doing a lot of things well? One agent, single agent.
It's funny. Like, so Gemini 3 just rolled out recently, and it's kind of the first, some of my like priors are kind of being disproved. Like it's actually very, very good at having, let's call like a monolithic agent, like very long instructions, many tool calls, and I don't see as many diminishing returns on that. But even if you have an agent that has many specialties, I think if you take a step back and look at like an ecosystem, again, let's say an enterprise organization, the pattern I'm seeing the most is you'll have almost like an agent mesh, or like some type of like I would say a mesh or like a hub and spoke model, where you have like an entry point that then gets routed to different agents, and some agents are very specialized, some are more generic for maybe a certain department. And now what's going to happen is, and we're trying, you're trying to prevent this, but in the like the late 2010s, you had all these microservices, right, that were introduced, and there wasn't a standardized protocol. So it really ended up introducing like dependency hell. Everybody thought, oh, we're making very modular things, but when you have modular A, B, C, and they all rely on each other, it's very hard to now kind of like add a new one and knowing that it's probably going to break the existing pipeline. So it kind of was like, ended up like getting over-engineered, I would say. So now there's things in the ecosystem that it feels like history is trying not to rhyme right now. And you have these protocols that trying to like standardize communications between agents to allow for a more democratization of like discovery of agents. So whatever your entry point is to then kind of talk to the mesh to solve your problem.
From this, AI is here for good. AI is staying. We should all be embracing it. There's no need to be, scared of it, shy away from it. Embrace it and leverage it with the right expectations. If that happens, and if all these industries are embracing it, and I am a huge proponent of medical embracing this as much as possible, because I actually think that this is going to be our answer to a lot. At some point, humans can't compute as fast as what AI can compute. So I think it's a necessity to get medical and everything else on here. But if all these industries are embracing it, jumping on and getting on, how is this supported from an infrastructure standpoint? Where and how do all these computers and all these models and all this computing happen, and what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, you're definitely feeling constraints right now in terms of, people say, do we have enough GPUs? But if you listen to like the last round of quarterly reporting, it's energy, in my opinion. Like the power grid is the number one constraint, especially in the US, like not building fast enough. The alternatives are either not being embraced. There's a lot of regulation that's, makes it very hard to build. I think the way we're going now, we have to figure out how to like unblock that. The other thought that I have is, a lot of these, especially the large language models, I don't see them ever being able to be run locally. But I do think we're going to get to a point where there's going to be some type of query that can be run locally. So then it becomes like adopted all on our phones much more easily. And then it's really just like, do I have the battery life? And not do I have like internet, connectivity to hit the API. I don't think we're there yet. Like there's this like small language model, like SLM is like the term that I see a lot right now. So if you use these small language models, they're that's impressive, but I don't see it like actually driving the same efficiencies and like the same like complex reasoning as some of the like larger ones that have to be hosted on the cloud. But I do think we're going to get to a point where there's going to be this whole ecosystem of language models being run locally.
That's really, really, really interesting. Like, so I just learned something new today, which is amazing. That if you're going to run a small language model, in theory, you could have these small language models that's highly specialized in certain areas that are less taxing from an energy consumption perspective and everything else. And you could, because I think we're so fascinated right now as adopters with these large language, do everything, right? Like large language model, it's got everything I need. I could talk to this LLM about essentially everything. It's got data from everywhere. It's doing everything. But if we start splitting into these small language models, it does seem like the winner for like an infrastructure standpoint, where our phone could support a small language model for almost anything if we wanted to.
And I feel like Apple has been making like, that's where then it becomes the power of like these specialized chips, and like, can it does it threaten kind of the GPU like stranglehold on all of this? Like, I feel like there is going to be this point where there's going to be some innovation there.
You have to be in the top 3% of exposure with enterprise use of AI is my assumption. Because it's all either running through, your team at Google or, a team at AWS or a team somewhere else. Like you have to be. Probably,
yeah. I mean, I feel like super lucky. So like in 2023, we were in Europe presenting to a COO and CTO of a huge bank out there about at the time it was a RAG solution, but RAG didn't really exist yet. It was just kind of coming into play. Presenting to them our findings. We were using the Palm model which is before Gemini. It was not very good, but when we walked out the door, OpenAI and Microsoft was waiting to then do their pitch. Like, I've been in the forefront of this since the get. It's kind of crazy. That is super wild. Blessed.
So if that's the case, you're seeing a lot, you're at the forefront of it. I don't want to say where do you see it go, because that's like way too open-ended, but I guess on a scale of 1 to 10, where do you think we're at with the potential of where this ends up 10 years, 20 years, 30 years from now?
30 years, even 10 years, it's really hard to predict. But I think I go back to what you said earlier about cloud adoption and how even though we're still like 10 years into that, what is it? There's like some statistics of maybe like 40% of workloads. Like it's still so few of workloads that are being adopted. So I think it's going to be certain things or certain industries, maybe like kind of like you had like the web native companies that were coming out when cloud was starting. I think you're going to have like AI native companies, that you're going to have very small companies that are very niche oriented, not a lot of overhead in terms of like human capital, human staff that are super efficient at whatever their niche is and kind of trying to disrupt the industry. I think that's really what you're going to see a lot. Now, how fast the enterprise adopts this, I think it's a combination of like how much pressure boards are feeling, what's the, economic climate, like how much change do people are really waiting to embrace. It's tough. I know personally in terms of like my exposure to like, I pretty much, one of the bad things, not bad things, but like one of the things I do miss. So I was at Looker for like a year, and like one of the best parts of it was very like SMB focused. Like I got to work with a lot of like web native companies that were still pretty early in their like life cycles, pre-IPO. It was super fun to work with them. And unfortunately, I don't get as much exposure to that. I work with way more larger enterprise companies now. So even that, I feel like they don't move as fast enough. So, you got to find these teams that are like, will hop on the roller coaster and kind of like execute with you. I do see a wider adoption of them embracing it, but in terms of like wide scale adoption, I don't think it's going to change this year or next year as much as as the hype would make you believe. So if you go back, to this presentation in 2023 to this huge bank, we ended up winning it. They were at Next. I ended up having to go back to the client like maybe like 5 months ago. It was just rolling out to their end users.
Wow.
In 2025.
Wow.
Right. And like we had already established high evals, like so much adoption. Like when I had to go on an onsite there to like for something else, like unrelated, and you would meet these people that had heard about this the software we developed and were like so itchy to get to it, but it was still like not fully rolled out yet for whatever reason it was. I'm not really sure. I'm sure there's a lot of good reasons for it from a security perspective, but it just shows you the slowness of adoption, even of like a great product.
I see that. I think the real innovation has to be coming from the seed stage companies out there, the ones that are getting started. They're speedboats. They're hyper focused. They're going to build a little bit faster and learn a little bit more. That's probably where the force adoption would come in.
Yeah, I have a buddy that left. He was part of like the Looker ecosystem, and they went and they built like an early agent for like data and analytics, and to really like empower your analytics team. And the idea was like you don't have to log in and open up your dashboard every day and like kind of then take action. Like you would get a summary report, and they iterate new features so quickly. Like that's the only way to really do this if you're going to really like try to like ride the full wave is iterate.
We took that exact approach with Arrive. We pushed. We have our model there is to touch 100 firms. We don't want to build a SaaS platform touching thousands and thousands. We want to go deep with 100. So we're very vocal about our path. But by having 100, you now have standardization, customization, and you can start flying with these feature enhancements. And we're confident enough where we feel strongly that if we could automate, like we expect to automate, just 100 firms, those 100 firms could take a ton of the market share inside the whole space. So yeah, I think earlier on, staying lean and nimble, we've seen it over and over again, even from like the venture side that we've done and everything else.
And then having like the right, I don't know, what's the word, like observability to flag the right signals of like what do I want to focus on for my next like iteration, my next features, like my next sprint, which features am I going to focus on that these signals, either like customer interviews, product usage, like there's so many different fees that can give you these signals, but you really have to like think about that very early in the process.
The winners are going to be the ones that could filter out the noise, stay with their vision, and implement their vision flawlessly, with letting their customer base not control the roadmap, but get the information back, ingest it, and then stay on track and say, okay, how can I solve for this inside my visionary roadmap that I have?
It's a delicate balance.
It is, but it's an exciting time.
I've been in, yeah, besides my like 1 year at JP Morgan, I've only pretty much been in like customer services. So like I've always had that like kind of mentality, but you know, one of the arts is knowing when what the customer is asking is totally wrong, but how to tell them that they're not, you know, you're not wrong. I'm listening to you, but you're not right.
Completely. Yeah. No, I think we're at an exciting time. You're seeing it firsthand. Adoption is kicking in. We're seeing it, and we're innovating with it, and everything else like that. It's not scary. I do believe that we will have some sort of regulation kick in. I think some of these models that are being generated or products that are being generated will need to go through at some point a certification of some sort, right? Whether medical, accounting, law, anything that's got a license behind it. I do think we're going to start to see a wave of bad actors hurting an industry. Regulation is going to need to step in to make sure that we're not just relying on some random VC-backed company out of their parents' garage, like running like crazy. I think there's going to be some sort of certification that kicks in, and we'll see. We're very early, but all in all, you've seen a ton. I can't express enough to our audience and everybody who we talk to. Just embrace it. If you're going to fight it, you're done. Like it's in accounting, finance, legal, insurance. If you're going to fight this, you're not going to be here in the next 5 years. So embrace it now. Be an early adopter of it. Hang on tight and go for the ride.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, John, I appreciate the time. I'll let you get back to your stuff. We're going to touch on a couple more of these topics over the next couple of releases and drops that we do here. And thank you guys, everybody, for listening, liking, subscribe below. And anything else that you want to close it out, Johnny?
Nah, man. Thanks so much for having me. And can't wait for Scottsdale.
You got it. Thank you guys. Thanks, everybody, for listening.